What kind of person looks into the eyes of a child they promised to protect and decides to kill? It's a question that chills the spine, not just because of its horror, but because of its terrifying familiarity. The people we trust most, those invited into our homes, our lives, and our inner circles, are the ones we never imagined capable of unspeakable acts. And yet, time and again, the headlines prove otherwise. On December 9th, 2020, a 911 call came in from Sandy Springs, Georgia. The voice on the other end was composed, almost detached. A child was unconscious. The babysitter claimed the toddler had fallen at the playground. Medics rushed to the scene. The girl was transported to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Despite every attempt to revive her, the child, just 2 years old, was pronounced dead on arrival. Her name was Fallon Fridley. Blonde curls, bright blue eyes, and a smile that lit up rooms. Fallon was full of life until someone extinguished it. What began as a report of a playground accident quickly unraveled into something far more sinister. Medical examiners found trauma no fall could explain. Investigators found lies, and behind them a betrayal deeper than anyone could have imagined. This isn't just a story about a child's murder. It's about the horror of misplaced trust, about a mother who handed her daughter to a friend she had known and loved for years, believing her child was safe. Fallon Fridley didn't die in an accident. She died at the hands of someone who was supposed to protect her. And as we peel back the layers of this case, what we uncover isn't just a tragedy, it's a reminder that sometimes the real monsters wear familiar faces. You're watching That Police Officer channel. If you're new here, here's what we do. Real cases, real investigations, all told from the perspective of someone who's been behind the badge. We break down the facts, walk through the evidence, and uncover the truth behind some of the most haunting crimes. If you're into true crime with a professional edge, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Fallon was the kind of child who seemed to bring joy wherever she went. At just 2 years old, she had the kind of energy that filled a room, the kind of laughter that stayed with you long after it faded. With her bouncy blonde curls, sparkling blue eyes, and a voice just beginning to form full sentences, Fallon was at that precious age when the world is still full of wonder. Everything was new. Every color, every animal, every song on the radio. She loved dancing to music in the living room, giggling at cartoons, and cuddling close to her mother, Kristen. Kristen Fridley was a single mother doing everything she could to give her daughter a happy, stable life. They lived in Sandy Springs, a quiet, tree-lined suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. It was a place where families knew their neighbors, where playgrounds dotted the corners of neighborhoods, and where people felt safe leaving their children with trusted friends. Kristen worked full-time, like so many parents, and when she couldn't be there, she needed someone she could rely on, someone she could trust implicitly. That person was Kirsty Flood. Kirsty wasn't just a babysitter. She was Kristen's friend, someone she had known for more than 5 years. They'd shared meals, memories, and life's ups and downs. Flood had been around Fallon since the child was born. In Kristen's eyes, she was like extended family. That trust didn't come lightly. It was built over time, piece by piece, the way only true friendships can be. So when Kristen handed over her daughter each morning, she didn't just expect care, she expected love, protection, and kindness. And by all outward appearances, that's exactly what Flood provided. There were photos of her playing with Fallon, videos of them together, moments that seemed to capture an authentic bond. Flood would update Kristen during the day, texting cute stories or pictures of Fallon playing or eating her lunch. It looked like everything a parent could hope for in a caregiver. But underneath that familiar surface, something else was hiding, something darker, something dangerous. For Fallon, her world was small but full of love. She adored her mother and trusted the people around her without question, as children do. She believed the adults in her life would keep her safe, that hugs meant love and smiles meant security. To everyone who knew her, Fallon wasn't just a little girl. She was the center of her mother's universe. Kristen had built her life around Fallon. Her routines, her decisions, her every plan for the future. They were inseparable. Every moment away from her daughter was made easier only by the belief that Fallon was in good hands. That belief, the trust, the comfort, the peace of mind, wasn't just broken, it was shattered. In a world where so many parents struggle with the question of who to trust with their children, Kristen thought she had found her answer. She thought she had made the right choice. But as we now know, that choice led to unimaginable loss. December 9th, 2020 started like any other day for Kirsty Flood. Or at least that's how she wanted it to appear. Fallon Fridley had been left in her care once again, just as she had been countless times before. It was routine, comfortable, a pattern that had become normal over time. Kristen Fridley dropped off her daughter with the woman she trusted, not knowing it would be the last time she'd see Fallon alive. From the outside, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Flood posted on social media, texted friends, and went about the day as if she was just another caregiver watching over a toddler. But as the day progressed, something changed. Sometime in the afternoon, Flood made a 911 call from the apartment she shared with her boyfriend, Jeffrey Myers. Her voice was calm, eerily calm. According to the call, Fallon had fallen off a slide and hit her head. Flood told the dispatcher the toddler was unconscious and unresponsive. Emergency responders arrived within minutes. When they entered the apartment, Fallon's tiny body was already limp. Paramedics performed CPR as they rushed her to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, desperately trying to restart a life that was slipping away. But it was too late. At the hospital, doctors worked for nearly an hour, but there was nothing more they could do. Fallon Fridley, just 2 years old, was pronounced dead on arrival. News of her death shattered Kristen. The world collapsed beneath her feet. The explanations Flood offered in those early hours did little to calm the chaos. She fell off the slide, she insisted. A terrible accident. Tragic, yes, but plausible, or so it seemed. Police launched a standard investigation, as is protocol with the sudden death of a child. At first, Flood was cooperative. She repeated the same story. She and Fallon had gone outside. Fallon climbed onto a slide, slipped and hit her head. Flood claimed she brought her back inside, tried to comfort her, but Fallon started acting sluggish, then became unresponsive. But when investigators began to press for details, cracks began to show. Medical professionals at the hospital were already skeptical. The injuries on Fallon's body didn't line up with a simple playground fall. The bruises were inconsistent with a single impact, and some weren't even fresh. A CT scan revealed a fractured skull, but more disturbingly, it wasn't the only trauma. There were internal injuries, deep bruising on her organs, bleeding around the brain, and injuries that indicated repeated abuse, not an isolated accident. The Fulton County Medical Examiner quickly ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head, and the manner of death, homicide. This was no playground accident. Investigators returned to Flood's apartment with a warrant. What they discovered over the next few days would dismantle the image Flood had tried to maintain. Her phone was seized, and with it, a dark window into her mind was opened. Internet searches included phrases like, "What type of people enjoy abusing children? What does it mean to have a sudden urge to hurt someone? And how long does it take to die from a head injury?" The questions weren't hypothetical. They weren't academic. They were personal, calculated. The timing of these searches, conducted in the days and even hours leading up to Fallon's death, painted a disturbing picture. one that shattered any doubt about whether this was truly an accident. Flood, who had once been considered a trusted friend and caregiver, now appeared as something else entirely. A person capable of not just lying, but of coldly calculating violence against a defenseless child. As detectives continued to probe, their suspicion hardened into certainty. The evidence was mounting, and it told a far more gruesome story than anyone had anticipated. What happened to Fallon that day wasn't a tragic mishap. It was a brutal, violent act committed by someone who was supposed to protect her. And it left a community grieving, a mother devastated, and a case that would only grow darker as more details came to light. Fallon's death marked the beginning of a deeper investigation, one that would peel back layers of manipulation, cruelty, and betrayal. The Imes story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. In the hours following Fallon Fridley's death, Kirsty Flood remained under close observation, but not as a suspect, not yet. She was the caregiver, the last person to see Fallon alive, and protocol demanded she be interviewed. At first, Flood appeared calm and compliant. She answered every question, repeated her story without hesitation. Fallon had fallen from a slide. She'd cried, seemed tired, and then collapsed. It sounded believable, tragic, but believable. But as detectives from Sandy Springs Police Department began to dig deeper, the pieces didn't quite fit. The slide Flood mentioned, investigators visited the park. The height and structure of the playground equipment made it nearly impossible that such a fall could result in the extent of Fallon's injuries. And Fallon's medical report told a different story altogether. Multiple blunt force injuries to the head, trauma to internal organs, and older bruises in various stages of healing. It didn't add up. As suspicion mounted, investigators revisited Flood's timeline and behavior. They reviewed texts, reviewed surveillance footage from the apartment complex, and, most telling of all, analyzed her phone. When confronted, Flood cried. She didn't protest too loudly, didn't become defensive. Instead, she leaned into grief. She clung to Kristen, tearfully texting her condolences, pretending to mourn alongside her. She wrote about how devastated she was, about how much she loved Fallon. She even posted tributes on social media, memorial photos, heartbreak emojis, captions full of grief. To outsiders, she looked like a devastated caregiver, grappling with the death of a child she loved. But behind closed doors, investigators were already seeing through the mask. The timing of her online searches was damning. The autopsy report was clear. The trauma was not accidental. It was violent, sustained, and intentional. As the scope of the investigation widened, police turned their attention to others in Flood's orbit, particularly her boyfriend, Jeffrey Myers. He was in the apartment that day. He'd been there when paramedics arrived. At first, he was considered a potential witness, maybe even a person of interest. Could he have participated in the abuse? Was he aware of it? Could he have stopped it? Myers cooperated with police, and in his statements, he claimed to have seen nothing suspicious that day. He said Flood was acting normally, that he was unaware of any danger to Fallon. His story didn't conflict with Flood's, at least not on the surface. But investigators were cautious. If Flood had concealed her violent tendencies from Kristen for years, what else had she been hiding? Still, the evidence against Myers never reached the threshold for criminal charges. The investigation would continue to scrutinize his role, but the focus shifted squarely to Flood as the timeline, injuries, and internet search history converged. The image of a grieving friend began to crumble. Behind the tears, behind the social media posts, Kirsty Flood was quickly emerging as the prime suspect in one of the most heartbreaking crimes Sandy Springs had ever seen. As detectives followed the growing trail of evidence, they were about to uncover even more disturbing truths, ones that would not only confirm their worst fears, but shock a community that once trusted her. Flood had typed things like, "How long does it take to die from blunt force trauma? What does it mean to have a sudden urge to hit a toddler? And types of child abuse and how to cover it up." These weren't cries for help. They were calculated, clinical curiosities, disturbing signposts pointing toward premeditated harm. The timeline began to narrow, and with the help of cell tower data, phone metadata, and neighborhood surveillance footage, detectives were able to piece together the final hours of Fallon's life with painful precision. Fallon hadn't died alone with Flood in a back room. She hadn't simply passed away quietly after an accident. The data showed a flurry of activity in the apartment around the time of the alleged fall. There were gaps in Flood's story, and those gaps were now filled with hard digital evidence. But this story isn't over, not even close. We've seen the crime, but the investigation is just beginning. And what comes next will shake everything you think you know about this case. In part 2, we dive deeper into the evidence, the betrayal, and the trial that will decide Kirsty Flood's fate. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on so you don't miss it when part 2 drops. Because justice is coming, and you'll want to be there when it does.